You're gonna need a mop for the ceiling. He didn't just surrender, he exploded. They say war is an art, but what Earth sent wasn't painted. It wasn't sculpted. It didn't sing. What Earth sent was molded in steel, raised in shadows, and trained not to win wars, but to make the enemy wish they'd never started one. The Galdron Accord had poked Earth long enough, tapping borders, buzzing civilian stations, and broadcasting their superiority complex across neutral systems like drunk armchair generals at a retirement home. But the moment they crossed into Jupiter's demilitarized orbit and disabled the Wayfarer 6 habitat, they asked the question Earth hadn't answered in 50 years. Do you want peace or do you want war? Earth said nothing. It just opened a black box labeled Black Anvil. Now, if you ask a Galdron what happened next, they'll give you 3 different lies and 1 nervous breakdown. But I was there. My name's Briggs. I was the first human they captured. They didn't know what to do with me. Thought I was some kind of forward observer. I wasn't. I was just a logistics officer trying to deliver coffee pods to the Neptune front. I got caught with my hands up and my thermal suit halfway zipped because they came in faster than expected, and I dropped my stun baton into the microwave. They dragged me aboard a battle cruiser called the Tears Tooth, a pompous thing with gold trim on the gravity compensators, and a commander who wore 6 medals across a chest he hadn't earned. Captain Vrosk, his name was. He kept asking me when the Terran War Corps would arrive. I told him I didn't know. He laughed and had me thrown into a holding cell next to a Bellari prisoner who kept licking the walls and mumbling about silver spiders. 2 days in, the lights turned red. Not battle station red, something deeper, angrier. The kind of red that makes you think you've done something really, really stupid, and the universe is about to punish you like a vengeful school teacher. The guards stopped talking. One of them dropped his pulse rifle and started crying, quietly. I heard screams through the vents, short, then cut off. I'd fought in the Martian clean sweep of 41. I knew that sound. That wasn't a breach. That was a message. My cell door opened by itself. That never happens unless someone very high up wants you dead or very far away. Instead, a man stepped in. He wore standard Terran infiltration black. No rank patches, no insignia. Just matte armor and a helmet shaped like something you'd find in an industrial grinder. He looked at me, said nothing, just nodded toward the hall. I followed. We walked past open cells, still seated corpses, and one room full of unconscious Galdrons, twitching like they'd been tased mid-dream. No alarms, no lockdowns. The only sound was a low, echoing hum coming from the ship's power core, like something was drawing too much energy, and the reactor wasn't sure whether to oblige or melt. I finally asked him, "Are you Black Anvil?" He paused for half a second. "Number, I'm just the driver." The man led me to the command bridge. Doors didn't open for him. They collapsed. Like the metal had figured out resistance was a bad idea. Inside, Captain Vrosk was slumped in his command chair, eyes open, mouth open, body still twitching in irregular pulses like he was trying to fight something that had already won. One of the Terran commandos sat calmly at the nav station, rerouting the ship. Another was pouring a glass of water. For himself, not for me. They didn't speak much, but I heard enough in fragments to understand. The assault had lasted 7 minutes. No weapons fired, no atmospheric breach, just entrance vectors, precision insertions, and psychological overrides. The Galdron security AI had been bypassed within 2 seconds. Environmental controls had been weaponized. At some point, every gravity plate on the ship had reversed at once. "You came for coffee," one of them finally said to me. "Now you're part of the recall." "Recall?" The driver nodded. "Earth calling everything back. No more border tiptoeing, no more soft power. They asked for war. And this is how we respond?" The man looked at me like I just asked if water was wet. "This isn't war," he said. "This is regret. We make sure they remember the taste of it, forever." I watched him place a small device on the captain's corpse. It blinked once and then played a single word in a voice I recognized as belonging to General Rourke of Earth's Unified Command. "Return." The screen behind him showed multiple Galdron ships drifting, engines dead, life signs present, movement absent. I realized then, this wasn't a strike, it was a rehearsal. Earth wasn't attacking to win, it was warming up. Vrosk's flagship drifted like a blind fish through the neutral sector. Nobody fired on it, nobody hailed it. In fact, nobody wanted to admit they saw it at all. Word spreads faster than lasers out here, and every satellite, outpost, and civilian barge had already heard the rumor. Earth's finally mad. The ship's lights dimmed gradually. The commandos didn't touch a thing. They left Vrosk's bridge just as they'd found it, quiet, eerie, and filled with that strange hum pulsing from somewhere in the hull. They moved through the corridors like surgeons in someone else's operating room, always calm, always precise. I was tagged for evac with two others, Wolf, a Terran demolition specialist who whistled while setting time charges, and Carlo, a medic who treated a Galdron burn victim with the same focus he might have used patching a scratched drone. Neither of them wore rank. Earth didn't use ranks in this division. You were either part of Black Anvil or you weren't real. We exited through an airlock on Deck 12. The Galdron guards on that level weren't dead, just wrong. Their eyes moved too slowly. Some had tied their own hands behind their backs with cable wire. One was giggling in a corner and whispering, "The shadows knew my name," over and over. Wolf didn't look at them. Carlo checked for bleeding, then moved on. Outside the ship, a Terran corvette hovered like a tick on glass. No engines glowed, no heat signature. It just hovered, humming at the same pitch as the flagship's dying systems. I realized they'd synced it, like you might sync a predator's heartbeat with its prey's breathing. We boarded. Inside, the lights were dim, smooth and clean. The air didn't smell like fuel or sweat. It smelled like nothing, like they'd scrubbed out even the concept of scent. The pilot, another faceless soldier in matte armor, didn't acknowledge us. He simply adjusted course and accelerated. "Where to now?" I asked Wolf. "Vardos Prime," he muttered. "They shelled an Earth diplomatic station 2 hours ago. Claimed it was an accident." Carlo checked his bag. "They always say it's an accident. Then they send flowers and deny the bodies." I sat in silence. Earth had sent warnings, treaties, and non-engagement protocols for years. But the frontier systems didn't care. They saw Earth as slow, civil, predictable, until Black Anvil. "What exactly are you, Guy?" I asked. "Officially," Wolf looked at Carlo. Carlo shrugged. "We're the chapter they erased from the manual," Wolf said. Carlo added, "We don't conquer. We don't liberate. We isolate patterns of aggression and break them." I nodded like I understood. I didn't. When we arrived at Vardos Prime, no orbital defenses greeted us. The station's auto-targeting systems flickered uncertainly, then dropped offline before we got within range. Wolf leaned back in his seat like a man watching the sunrise. "They've already seen us. They know." We docked without resistance. No alarms, no scramble. Just a quiet vacuum tug and the soft hiss of air pressure equalizing. We stepped into a hallway of polished alloy and silence. Inside, Galdron officers stood frozen at their consoles. One flinched as Wolf passed, even though Wolf didn't raise a weapon. A commander tried to speak. Carlo handed him a small black box and kept walking. When the commander opened it, he dropped it instantly and backed into a wall. I never saw what was inside. We reached the administrative core in 6 minutes. Wolf placed a puck on the center terminal. It emitted a low tone. Nothing else. Then he looked up at me. "Tell me something," he said. "What's the first rule of containment?" I blinked. "I don't know. Isolate the breach?" He smiled faintly. "Nah. Make the breach, wish it stayed sealed." The puck pulsed once. Across the station, lights dimmed. Doors locked. Atmospheric controls switched to Terran override. And a message played over every comm unit on every floor. "Your conduct has triggered Earth's preemptive regret protocol. Remain where you are. Assistance is neither required nor advised." I stood still. It wasn't just a takeover. It was a lesson. They weren't here to destroy the Vardos command. They were here to make sure every officer, clerk, and technician remembered what helplessness tasted like. Not for a minute, for days. "What happens now?" I asked. Carlo handed me another puck. "You give this to their governor. No words, no threats. Just give it. Then walk away." I looked at the puck. Smooth. Weightless. I didn't dare ask what it did. As I left with Carlo, Wolf tapped the terminal once more. Behind me, the station's AI voice began reading names. Galdron names. One by one. Loud enough for everyone to hear, the governor of Vardos Prime met me in his private atrium, where sunlight from 3 artificial moons spilled across imported Yeltrian moss and a waterfall that never stopped pretending to be natural. His robes were ceremonial, but his hands shook under the table. Behind him stood 2 guards who didn't speak, didn't blink, and didn't reach for their weapons. I handed him the puck. He didn't touch it at first, just stared at it like it might hiss or bite. Eventually, he leaned forward and lifted it with trembling fingers, turning it over once before setting it down again like it weighed 100 kilos. You are the messenger?" he asked. I nodded. "You shelled Earth's diplomatic base." It was, "No one's here to debate." He glanced at the puck. "What is this?" "Regret. Measured and specific." He blinked at that. "It's just a recording device." "That's what you think it is." He gestured toward the waterfall. "Vardos is a neutral world. We are known for trade, not blood. Earth should not." I leaned forward. "Do you know what that puck did on the last station?" He swallowed hard. "It listed names, not targets, not enemies. Names, personal, exact. From top brass down to cafeteria workers. Every person who signed the firing order. Every person who authorized the shipment. Every comm officer who rerouted that accidental barrage. Earth knew them, tracked them, let them stew." He didn't respond. Didn't have to. "You're not being bombed," I added. "You're being archived." We left him in silence. Back aboard the Corvette, Wolf was cleaning a jagged tool that didn't look like anything I'd ever seen in a standard Terran kit. Carlo was reviewing med scans, but none of them were human. "Vardos is quiet," I told them. "Too quiet. You think they'll act?" "No," Wolf replied. "They've just realized they're not special." Carlo looked up. "They thought distance kept them safe, or politics, or wealth. But Earth isn't broadcasting a warning anymore. We're demonstrating." We lifted off before nightfall. A second ship joined us, a black shuttle with no visible engines. It didn't transmit ID or authorization, but it flew in perfect formation with us, down to the millisecond. "Who's that?" I asked. "Another team," Wolf said. "Different script. Same play, same regret." Our next target wasn't military. It was the Excora Assembly, 5 planets linked by trade routes and secured by mercenaries with contracts written in 10 languages. They weren't part of the Accord, but they'd lent ships and supplies to Galdron forces for years, always claiming plausible deniability. Earth finally pulled the thread. We arrived at Excora 4 during peak trade cycle. Orbit was stacked with freighters, ore transports, and leisure crafts. Wolf walked into the station's control tower alone. Carlo and I waited in the docking bay. He returned after 3 minutes. "Done?" Carlo asked. Wolf nodded. "Terminal is clean. Gave them 5 minutes." "5 for what?" "To check the logs and realize how much we know." Carlo looked at me. "They'll try to run." "Doesn't matter," Wolf added. "Their next port of call will be flagged. They're already marked." That night, a dozen Excora officials fled to neutral worlds. Every single one was intercepted. Not by soldiers, but by Terran civilians. Dock hands, accountants, retired welders with comm access and exact instructions. None of the targets were hurt. They were simply detained, questioned, and handed a folded card that read, "You helped fuel a war. Earth remembers." Then they were released. By dawn, Escora's main hub was dark. No shots fired, no threats made. But the network was unraveling. We headed for Zarin Cradle next, a synthetic moon used for information exchange and diplomatic meets. It was supposed to be untouchable. Every faction had a claim on it. Dozens of treaties protected its neutrality. But Earth had sent a man there already. One man. The Black Anvil called him Mace. I saw him through the viewport as we docked, standing in the central square, unarmed, surrounded by Zarin's enforcers. His hands were behind his back, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something beneath the noise. As we disembarked, Wolf whispered, "Watch carefully." Mace didn't move. Not when they shouted. Not when they pointed. One guard stepped too close. Mace spoke a single word. The guard froze. Literally, muscles locked, jaw clenched. Then Mace pointed at the sky, and every light screen across the cradle blinked to the same display. A scrolling list of trade violations, arms transfers, and encrypted messages. Proof that the cradle had been brokering weapon sales to Galdron fleets for a decade. Zaren's governor collapsed in public. No explosions, just exposure. We left as the enforcers turned on each other. We returned to Earth space under strict blackout. No signal, no chatter. The only sound inside the Corvette was the occasional hum of life support and Carlo's measured breath as he cleaned his gear with slow precision. Wolf stared out the viewport, watching stars slide by, jaw tight. I didn't ask what came next. I already knew. Earth didn't send Black Anvil for retaliation. It sent them to finish a thought. The last phase wasn't about targets. It was about proof, the kind that lingers, the kind no fleet can undo. Our final destination was Tarnos Grid, a sprawling hub that supplied 1/3 of the Accord's deep space cruisers. Tarnos was never hit during the war, never even brushed. It was considered too essential, too integrated, too far behind any line of fire. But Earth didn't draw lines. Earth made statements. We entered their perimeter under a diplomatic tag. No alarms. The Tarnos controller even welcomed us aboard with confusion. "You're early," the voice said through static. "We're done being late," Wolf answered. Inside the docking bay, there were no soldiers, just engineers, loaders, analysts. They watched us pass, some with curious glances, others with wary eyes. Carlo handed me a sealed case. It was cold, too cold. No labels, no locks. "Where do I take this?" I asked. "Central Op," he replied. "Put it on the table, walk away." "What's in it?" He met my eyes. "The truth." We moved fast, no detours, no interference. The corridors felt too clean, too quiet, as if the air itself suspected something wrong. Central Ops was a tiered command hall with a half circle of consoles and a long, polished table at the center. The man seated at its head looked up slowly as we entered. His badge read Dretton, Accord Supply Command. His face didn't shift as I placed the case in front of him. "Terran delegation?" "No," Wolf said. "Terran response." Dretton touched the case, then paused. "Is this a weapon?" Wolf shook his head. "Worse." When Dretton opened it, a hologram burst upward, painting the room in flickering light. It wasn't maps or ships or anything military. It was images. Refugees, civilians, technicians, dock workers from Terran colonies. Displaced, wounded, sometimes gone. Each tagged with a timestamp and a single phrase. Indirect casualty. One by one, the images filled the room. Not flashing, lingering. Behind Dretton, his aides looked away. One left the room. Another muttered, "We didn't authorize that." Wolf turned to them. "You funded it. You ignored it. You bought the parts and leased the carriers. You signed your names under neutral declarations and assumed Earth wouldn't connect the dots. This is emotional warfare," Dretton stammered. "It's propaganda." Carlo stepped forward. This is accountability." The projection shifted. Messages appeared. Private logs, intercepted comms, flagged orders. All showing how Tarnos had quietly funneled materials through intermediaries, always at a profit, always at one remove from violence. Wolf leaned on the table. "We don't need you to confess, just watch." At the end of the reel, the projection went dark. The room stayed silent for almost a full minute. Then the lights flickered. A soft chime sounded from every console. Tarnos's grid had just been disconnected from Earth's trade network. Every agreement, every fuel contract, every mining route, terminated. Not by sabotage, not by force, by decision. Earth's markets had reoriented in real time. No threats, no fire, just removal. Dretton looked up with real panic for the first time. "You can't isolate us." "You already did," Wolf said, turning to leave. "We just returned the favor." We walked out together. By the time we reached orbit, news had spread. Accord channels flared with denials, emergency sessions, and calls for mediation. But Earth didn't respond. No statements, no threats, just silence. The kind that makes empires wonder what they forgot. I sat beside Carlo on the return flight. Outside, stars glimmered like warnings. "So that's it?" I asked. "No more missions?" He shook his head. "There will be more. Not from us, from them. Quiet changes, behind closed doors, faces stepping down, fleets reallocated." "You really think it's over?" Wolf spoke from the pilot seat. "It'll never be over, but they'll remember this version." "What version is that?" "The kind of war Earth sends when it doesn't need to fight." He glanced back. "The kind they regret asking for."